It can be said that I traded chaos for candy when I met Ben. My life used to be consumed by disaster management and endless corporate firefighting. Every morning began with a whirlwind of calls, meetings, and paperwork, only to end with a sense of burnout and emptiness. But everything changed. Love, like a quiet storm, sweeps in where you least expect it and turns your world upside down. That's what happened. When I met Ben, it felt like stepping out of a stormy ocean into a peaceful garden where the air was filled with the aroma of caramel and vanilla. His family owned a small but cozy confectionery shop called Sugar Haven, and soon this tiny universe became my new home. Over time, I started helping with the store's finances. Budgets, reports, numbers, these were nothing compared to the corporate labyrinths I was used to navigating. Ben and I worked together, and every morning began with his radiant smile. "Good morning, love," he greeted me on a Monday as I walked into the store. The air was thick with the sweet scent of vanilla, and beams of morning sunlight danced across the shelves filled with candies. His smile was always a source of strength for me, a reminder of what we were doing this for. I smiled back, my eyes drifting to the stack of invoices. The store's finances were my domain. Over the past month, sales had climbed, and our new line of chocolates was an incredible hit. "Sales are going great," I said, trying to keep the optimism alive. Ben shrugged, clearly unbothered. "Well, that's that. As long as Mom's happy," he added with a slight smirk, though I caught a shadow flicker in his gaze. And, as if on cue, the shop door swung open, and Linda, Ben's mother, appeared in the doorway. She always showed up like a storm, unannounced and unavoidable. "Benjamin, my boy," she proclaimed, arms wide open. "You've outdone yourself. The shop looks fantastic." Her gaze landed on me, and her face hardened. "Anna, still playing shopkeeper?" she asked curtly. I exhaled quietly, knowing that any response would only escalate her displeasure. "Good morning, Linda." "Playing shopkeeper is keeping us in the black," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. Her lips curled into a sneer. Numbers. You'd be better off leaving that to the accountants and helping my son with real business." Ben, sensing the tension, quickly interjected. "Mom, Anna's doing an amazing job. Things are looking up because of her efforts." He wrapped an arm around my waist, silently supporting me. But Linda only huffed. "As long as my boy is happy." "That's what matters," she said before striding deeper into the shop, as if searching for something else to assert her presence. Ben squeezed my side, his voice soft and apologetic. "Don't let her get to you." I shook my head, forcing a smile. "I won't. Let's just focus on the shop." And focus we did. With each passing day, Sugar Haven became more than just a store to us. It was our little corner of paradise. Together, we created a place where sweets became the embodiment of our dreams and hard work. But perfection is rarely eternal. At first, it was subtle, small cracks that went unnoticed. Later, they began to grow. Ben became distracted, and I increasingly found myself wondering if something was wrong. I first noticed a change when our deliveries started arriving more frequently than usual, and their contents left me puzzled. Instead of sugar, spices, and other usual ingredients, they contained items with price tags that seemed completely unrelated to the shop. They were goods that made my stomach twist with unease. One evening, as I was locking the register after a long day, I noticed yet another box. "Another package?" I asked, eyeing the shiny wrapping. Ben, catching my look, eagerly grabbed the box and began tearing it open with the excitement of a child unwrapping a Christmas present. "Oh, it's the new phone I ordered," he said with a broad grin, already engrossed in his new toy. I raised an eyebrow. "Don't we have other priorities? Like the kitchen mixer that's been making weird noises for a week?" Ben waved me off, completely absorbed in peeling the protective film off the screen. "It's fine, Anna. We deserve a little joy," he said, as if trying to convince not just me but himself as well. Part of me wanted to argue, to remind him that our finances were walking a fine line, but I bit my tongue. This wasn't just about the phone. Linda, his mother, began visiting the shop more frequently. Her visits reminded me of a walk down the red carpet. Each time, she arrived in a new outfit that seemed far too expensive for someone uninvolved in the business. "Anna, look at this dress," she said one day, twirling in a floral ensemble. "Isn't it adorable?" I glanced at her calmly, trying to maintain my composure. "It's truly beautiful. But shouldn't we be saving up to repair the sign? It's starting to peel." Linda only chuckled, patting Ben on the cheek with the air of a queen overseeing her kingdom, with him as the sole heir. "Nonsense. The shop is doing just fine," she waved off my comment. Ben, who was only half listening to our conversation, nodded absent-mindedly. "Yeah, we're fine. Don't worry so much, Anna." But I was worried. I'd seen the numbers, and they didn't add up. The profits we were earning seemed to vanish like water through our fingers, consumed by Linda's new outfits and Ben's small personal purchases. The following week, I decided to revisit the issue. Sitting down together to review our finances, I tried to address the matter as gently as possible. "Maybe we should set a budget for personal expenses?" I suggested, keeping my tone calm. Ben looked at me as if I'd just proposed selling the shop and running away to join the circus. "Anna, come on. We're not in that bad of a situation. You've gotten so stingy lately." The word "stingy" stung. I knew it wasn't true. I wasn't being stingy, I was being prudent. "It's not about being stingy, Ben," I replied, trying to keep my voice firm. "It's about being smart. We need to think about Sugar Haven's future." But he didn't seem to hear me. His gaze had already shifted to his phone screen, scrolling through yet another online shop. "You're overthinking," he said dismissively, as though it was nothing. "It'll all work out." But I couldn't share his confidence. Every new purchase, every disregard for the real issues of our business, was another reminder that the cracks in our little universe were growing deeper. Everything changed on a Tuesday when Linda decided to bring in additional help. That day is etched in my memory because Tuesdays were when I handled inventory. I was immersed in sorting through our latest batch of candies, arranging jars on the shelves and checking invoices. Work always helped me focus, but today that calm was interrupted. The sound of footsteps, accompanied by Linda's ringing voice, made me straighten up. She was walking through the shop arm in arm with a young woman who couldn't have been older than 20. "Anna, this is Tessa," Linda announced grandly, as if introducing a princess. "Tessa, dear, this is Anna, my son's assistant." I quickly wiped my hands on my apron and extended my hand, unable to hide my surprise. "Nice to meet you, Tessa. But actually, I'm not an assistant, I'm a co-manager here." Tessa smiled, but her eyes remained cold. "I've heard so much about you," she said in a tone that was meant to sound complimentary. "I'm very excited to join the team." I glanced at Linda, whose smug smile left no doubt. This was her decision, and Ben's opinion had likely been ignored. "And what exactly will Tessa be helping with?" I asked, doing my best to keep my voice friendly. Linda waved her hand dismissively, as though the question was trivial. "Oh, she'll be helping with the business side of things. After all, you can't handle everything on your own." Her gaze flicked to my inventory list with a disdain that made it seem like a child scribbles. I clenched my teeth, holding back the response I wanted to give. "Well, we have a system in place," I said. "I'll need to get her up to speed." Tessa nodded, but it was clear her interest in the work ended at the threshold of that conversation. Within days, it became obvious that her help was more about observing from the sidelines than actively contributing. She spent her time scrolling through her phone or making petty remarks about everything she saw, without taking on any real tasks. The real shock came later when I accidentally came across her payroll records. The numbers next to her name made me freeze. It was more than we could afford for such a role, especially given our current financial situation. That same day, waiting for the right moment, I cornered Ben in the office. "Ben, can we talk?" He didn't look up from his computer, clearly engrossed in some small detail. "Of course, what's going on?" I took a deep breath, trying not to raise my voice. "It's about Tessa. Have you seen her salary? It's more than we can afford for the role she's playing." Ben finally looked up, his face showing mild irritation. "My mom said everything's fine. She thinks Tessa will bring a lot to the business." My jaw almost dropped. But we agreed to discuss employees like this together. Especially when it comes to how much we're paying them. Ben shrugged, a gesture that had become his universal response to everything. "What's done is done. Mom has a good feeling about her." I barely held back from exploding. "A good feeling isn't the same as a balanced ledger, Ben." He waved me off, as if my words were nothing more than whispers carried by the wind. I walked out of the office with a heavy feeling, as if I were once again left alone with problems no one wanted to acknowledge. While Linda and Ben wandered around with blindfolds on, enjoying their illusion of success, I saw our finances slowly but steadily slipping into disaster. I had always been the type of person who double-checked things, sometimes even triple-checked, especially when it came to numbers. Financial matters were like puzzles for me, requiring strict precision and focus. So when I came across an envelope shoved deep into the filing cabinet while searching for a missing invoice, my first thought was simple: another forgotten document. But what I found inside made my heart race, not from excitement, but from cold terror. It was the only document, with Sugar Haven written in the collateral holder field, and the sum listed was staggeringly high. It far exceeded what could be considered reasonable for our small business. I clutched the sheet as if it might disappear from my hands, and with trembling steps, I walked into Ben's office and immediately said, "What is this?" He looked up from the papers scattered on his desk, and for the first time in months, I saw something resembling guilt on his face. "Oh, it's nothing. Just a small loan I took out to cover, well, shop improvements." "Improvements?" I repeated, looking at him as if I didn't recognize him. "This amount could repair a shop 5 times the size of ours. What did you actually spend it on?" There was a pause, heavy like the silence before a storm. I saw Ben carefully choosing his words. "Well, okay, listen," he began finally. "I might have used part of it for the house. For us." "For us?" My voice trembled, and I didn't know where all this anger was coming from. "Or maybe for your gadgets and all these useless things you're spending money on." Ben shot up from his chair, it squeaking loudly and scraping back as if someone had hammered at my stretched patience. "It's not like that, Anna. You don't understand. It will all pay off in the end." "No, Ben," I said, shaking my head. "You took a loan against the shop without telling me. What don't I understand? How could you be so reckless?" I was almost shouting when Linda appeared, as if magnetically drawn to the tension in the air. She frowned when she saw the papers in my hand. "What's all this?" she demanded. Ben began to explain, but I cut him off. I handed the papers to Linda, feeling the anger surge within me. "Did you know about this?" She glanced briefly at the documents and waved them off as if they were insignificant. "Of course I knew. Ben is just doing what's necessary for our future. And who are you to criticize him for that? You're just the assistant." Her words, like sharp needles, pierced my heart. I felt the anger inside me flare up into a burning flame. "Just an assistant?" I said quietly, my voice trembling with restrained fury. I've kept the store afloat while you both treated it like your personal bank account. Ben turned pale, his eyes widening in shock. Linda, on the other hand, narrowed her eyes, her gaze filled with venom. "Quit, ungrateful little girl," she spat, her voice cold and cutting. But I couldn't stay silent any longer. "No," I exploded, surprising even myself. "It's ungrateful not to recognize the hard work someone has put into this business. It's foolish to risk everything for a house we don't even need." The words came rushing out, as if the dam of truth could no longer hold back the flood. Linda turned away, as though my words meant nothing to her. Ben remained silent, his shoulders slumped. But I knew I could never go back to the way things were. Everything that had built up over months, disappointment, exhaustion, bitterness, was finally spilling over. I waited for them to say something, anything, to justify themselves or perhaps blame me. But instead, the room fell into silence. Their eyes met mine, filled with a mixture of guilt and irritation, as if they had been caught red-handed. I couldn't stay there any longer. Gripping the documents in my hand like an unwritten verdict, I left the room, feeling the pulse of anger surging within me. The kitchen table in our apartment was never meant for business meetings, but that evening it became the arena for a serious discussion. Ben and Linda sat across from me, their faces tense, as if we were about to discuss not the store, but the fate of an entire nation. Ben cleared his throat, not daring to meet my gaze. "We need to talk about the future of the store," he began. I sat down, clasping my hands in front of me. "We've already done that," I replied evenly, reminding him of the documents I had found. Linda scoffed, crossing her arms over her chest. "We need to be realistic, Anna. The store isn't making enough money to cover the debts. We need to find funding somewhere." The word "we" sounded particularly harsh. I looked at her, feeling the cold fury building inside me. "What are you suggesting?" Her eyes lit up with a predatory gleam. "You have an inheritance from your parents. That money could cover the debts and get the store back on its feet." Her words hit me like a slap. I looked at her, trying to understand how I could have been so naive to think of her as an ally. "You want me to use the money my parents left me for my future?" Ben, who had been silent until then, finally spoke up. "It doesn't look like you're using it for anything else." I turned to him, not believing my ears. "That money was meant for my security, Ben," I said. "And what about our security?" retorted Linda. "You're part of this family now, aren't you?" I looked at both of them, feeling a heaviness growing in my chest. "Yes," I replied. "But it seems you only remember that when you need something from me." Ben shifted awkwardly in his chair, avoiding my gaze. "It's not like that, Anna, but we're sinking." "So you expect me to just give up my future so you can keep running things the way you want?" I asked. Linda leaned forward, her voice turning icy. "If you really care about the family, then yes." I remembered the sleepless nights, the long hours, the sacrifices I had made for the store, and it was too much. "If I do that," I said, feeling steel in my every word, "I want a third of the store. I want to be an official co-owner." The room fell silent, broken only by the ticking of the clock. Finally, Linda laughed, her laughter sharp and unpleasant. "Co-owner? Don't make me laugh. You're not a business person." I stood up, and the sound of my chair scraping across the floor was almost as loud as my voice. "Then find another way to cover your debts, because my inheritance is not your emergency fund." Ben remained still, his face impassive, but Linda turned red with anger. "You're going to let this family business sink," she spat. "I tried to save it," I said, trying to hold my ground. "But I won't burn myself just to keep you warm." I left them sitting at the table, feeling the anger boil inside me. Later that evening, I couldn't calm down. Lying in bed, I replayed their words in my mind, their indifference, their desperate attempt to use me. And yet, something inside me wouldn't let go. Some part of me kept pushing me toward action. Suddenly, I got up and dressed. My legs seemed to lead me to Sugar Haven on their own. The night was dark, and as expected, the store was empty. But the faint light from the back room immediately caught my attention. I pushed the door open, and the familiar sound of the bell rang. The bell's tone was almost ominous in the silence. The sweet smell of pastries, which usually calmed me, now felt heavy, saturated with the scent of betrayal, overwhelming everything around me. I moved toward the back of the store, and with every step, the whispering from the office grew clearer. I was getting closer to the open door, and then, glancing inside, I saw them. Ben was hugging Tessa, his new assistant, who giggled at something he whispered in her ear. In an instant, I threw the door open. They sprang apart, their faces instantly shifting from shock to guilt. "Anna," Ben stammered, adjusting his shirt. "What are you?" I stood in the doorway, enveloped in a cold calmness. In that moment, it felt as if I were standing in front of a mirror reflecting not life, but someone's cool farce. It felt as if I had just caught my husband in the arms of another woman. Tessa, blushing, began smoothing her hair, not meeting my gaze. "We were just going over the inventory," she mumbled, holding a sheet of paper. I said this with such a dry, scorched tone that I even surprised myself with how cold and detached my words sounded. "Inventory, huh?" I raised an eyebrow. "You're telling me that's what you were doing at midnight?" Ben took a step toward me, and I froze, not allowing him to come any closer. "Ben," I said with cold certainty, "I don't know what's worse, the deceit or the pathetic lie." Finally, Tessa spoke. She said words that didn't sound like an apology, but like a failed attempt at showing regret. "I'm really sorry, Anna. I didn't want any of this to happen." I looked at her, this young, naive girl who seemed to have no real understanding of the gravity of her actions. She was like a child caught in a snare, and I wasn't about to be the one to take responsibility for her thoughtless steps. "You should be," I said quietly. "And you should also look for another job." Ben protested immediately. He tried to approach, but I remained firmly in place, like a stone wall. "You can't fire her for this," he tried. I turned to him, my voice now as firm as steel. "I can, and I will. And I'll be looking for a good lawyer in the morning," I replied. His face went pale. He tried to say something, but I cut him off. "Anna, please, let's talk about this." His voice was now pleading. "No," I said, interrupting him. "There's nothing to talk about. You made your choice. Now you'll have to live with it." Without waiting for his response, I turned and left the store, not looking back. I heard Ben call out to me, but I disappeared into the darkness, as though fleeing from a nightmare that I had created myself. The morning after I caught Ben was bright, sharply contrasting with the heavy mood that hung over our house. I had gone to sleep at the apartment I rented out. The whole evening, I couldn't focus, trying to calm myself, but my thoughts kept returning to what had happened. I was sitting at the kitchen table when my phone vibrated. It was a message from Ben. I didn't want to read it, but curiosity won. I opened the message and saw a photo of a bank letter addressed to Ben, with the words, "Final notice, immediate payment required." He had written, "We need to talk about this." I typed my reply, brief and emotionless, "Seriously?" I prepared myself for the meeting with him and for what I would have to say. When I arrived at the bakery, Ben and Linda were already there, like animals in a cage. Linda spotted me first, and her face soured as I walked in. She couldn't hold herself back. "Decided to show up," she snapped. I entered the store without responding, nodding and holding her gaze. "You wanted to talk?" I asked. Ben handed me the letter. "The banks are on our backs. We could lose everything," he said, his voice hoarse. I quickly skimmed the letter, not surprised by the numbers listed in it. But even so, they still made me shudder. So, what's your plan? I asked, not hiding my sarcasm. Ben opened his mouth, but I already knew what he was going to say. And I didn't care. Linda's plan seemed to consist of glaring at me with anger and blaming me for all their failures. We wouldn't be in this situation if you'd just helped us when we asked, she declared, her voice cracking like a whip. I ignored her words and turned to Ben. What are you going to do? He ran a hand through his hair, looking exhausted and defeated. We thought you could cover the debts with your inheritance, he finally said, avoiding my gaze. My laugh escaped unexpectedly, bitter and cold. I already said I wouldn't do that, I replied, staring at him intently. Not without a share in the business. Linda lunged forward, as if she were about to put me in my place, her eyes gleaming with fury. You're being unreasonable, Anna. This is a family business. I met her challenge with an icy calmness that didn't reflect the storm inside me. And where was this family, I emphasized the word, when your son was spending money we didn't have and hiring his friends for fun? Ben tried to say something, but I could see his words were choking under the weight of the truth. His eyes dropped to the floor, and he fell silent. You can't play the family card only when it suits you, I continued, not allowing either him or Linda to distract me from the point. We'll figure something out, he mumbled, not lifting his head. You'll have to, I cut him off. And then Linda did something unexpected. She smiled. It wasn't a smile, but a gesture of threat disguised as confidence. Fine, she said, almost cheerfully. But if you're not going to help, then leave. We'll manage without you. You're fired. I looked at her, letting the silence stretch, as if giving her time to enjoy the moment. Then I answered with my own smile, but it was filled with contempt. Fine. Their surprise was almost comical. What? Ben asked, his voice trembling with disbelief. Fine, I confirmed. But I want you to know, I have photos of you and Tessa. I have records of all the money you've spent. If you think you can fire me and sweep this under the rug, you're wrong. Linda's face froze, her self-satisfied smile disappearing like snow under the sun. You wouldn't dare, she hissed. I dare, I replied, lifting my chin. And I will. And when I leave, I'll take all my hard work with me. Then you'll have to explain to the bank why the business is about to collapse without the person who was actually running it. Linda narrowed her eyes, but I saw her confidence waver. She was used to controlling everything around her, but now that control was slipping through her fingers. It had been months since I last stepped into Sugar Haven. Life had settled into a new normal. The place of sweets and pretended harmony had given way to the sharp sound of paper, focused conversations, and the sight of people determined to succeed even in a crisis. Now, my mornings didn't begin with the scent of vanilla and caramel, but with a cup of coffee in a small office where I managed the affairs of my new company. This rhythm was simpler, more honest, and, most importantly, it was mine. I sat in my new office, feeling strangely peaceful. The spacious room, decorated in a minimalist style, was a sharp contrast to the cramped, cozy back room of the bakery where I had spent so many hours. On the desk in front of me lay documents, neatly arranged by category, and outside the window, the bustling street hummed with passers-by and the sound of traffic. The phone on the edge of the desk rang, and glancing at the caller ID, I saw the name, Claire. Claire had been one of the few who worked at Sugar Haven during the days when everything still seemed possible. After my departure, we had kept in touch, though not often. Hi, Claire, how are you? I greeted her cautiously. Claire's news always carried a hint of the past, which I wasn't eager to revisit. Hi, Anna, her voice was full of discomfort, and the pause that followed her words seemed unusually long. I just thought you'd want to know. The store was closed last week. The bank took it. And the house too. I leaned back in my chair, and the unexpected weight I had been carrying suddenly disappeared. It wasn't joy, nor was it regret, rather, it was a strange, complex sense of relief. Understood, I said calmly. And how is Ben? And his mother? Claire sighed. They say things aren't going well for them. There are rumors that they've moved in with his aunt. No one has seen them for a while. I held my breath, trying to understand what I was feeling. Thank you for telling me, Claire. She hesitated before adding. Anna, everyone knew you were the heart of that place. It's never been the same since you left. Her words affected me more than I expected. A faint, sad smile appeared on my lips. I appreciate you saying that. Have you found a new job? Yes, she replied with a hint of warmth. I'm working at a bakery downtown now. It's not Sugar Haven, but it's a start. You've always had a talent for baking, I said. I'm sure you'll do great. We chatted for a few more minutes, reminiscing about the past, before we said our goodbyes. I hung up and looked out the window thoughtfully. The street below seemed busy, full of lives and stories, and I felt that part of my own story had finally been left behind. There was a knock at the door, and my assistant, peeking into the room, informed me. The clients are here, Anna. Great, send them in, I replied, shaking off the last remnants of nostalgia. A couple entered the office, their faces full of concern. I stood up to greet them, focused and ready. We've heard a lot about you, the woman said as we sat down at the table. They say you're the best crisis manager in town. I smiled, allowing the title to settle comfortably beside me. I'll do my best to live up to your trust. Tell me about your business, and we'll see how we can turn things around. They began speaking, and I listened, already formulating strategies in my head. This was my world now. A world where every problem had a solution, and every crisis opened new possibilities. Sugar Haven and its bitter memories were in the past, and ahead of me was a path I was carving myself, step by step. The meeting stretched on, and the client's initial anxiety gave way to smiles and hope. We discussed ideas that might have seemed bold, but which filled them with energy. When they left, I felt the sense of mission accomplished, a lightness I hadn't felt in a long time. I returned to my desk, taking a deep breath. For the first time in a long while, I felt that my world had gained stability. All this time, I had been seeking a path to healing, to rebirth. And now it was here, in every step I took forward, leaving failures, fears, and resentments behind. Sometimes the sweetest results come after the most bitter trials. And the future was now mine, a blank canvas on which I could paint anything I wanted.